if you would open your Bibles to Genesis, that's what we've been studying. And if that's why you came out tonight, you came out to the right study. We're in a verse-by-verse study in Genesis. 3 weeks ago is when we ended at the middle of chapter 30 in Genesis. I can't believe it was 3 weeks ago. I left for Israel the next day. And so here we are. Just maybe to help myself kind of get a running slide into this. So, we've been seeing as when you look at the book of Genesis, you can divide it a lot of different ways, but the easiest way to divide Genesis is chapters 1 through 11 and chapters 12 through 50. 1 through 11, actually a lot of people call that prehistory, the creation and all that stuff that was happening way, way, way back in the past. And then we come up to this time of this man, Abram, whose name is changed later on to Abraham. And God makes a promise to Abram. We often think of him, and I understand why we say it. I say it a lot, but it's really not that accurate. But we call him the first Jew. Well, he's not the first Jew. Everybody in the world was part of one of the nations. The world was full of nations at that time, and God calls this man Abram, from a place that we would call Kuwait today, what was called the Chaldees, and calls him from there and says, leave your country, leave your family, leave everything behind, and follow me and come to a land that I will show you, that I will give to your descendants, and I will bless you. And we read this incredible sevenfold blessing in the first 3 verses of chapter 12. And really everything that we've been studying from chapter 12 on, and actually to the end of the book, flows from that call. From the call to Avram, everything flows from there. God promises that he'll have a son of the promise. Well, he's 75 years old. His wife is 65, Sarah, and she's barren. And, of course, they end up trying to be, God's helpers. And so she says, take my handmaiden. And they have the son, Ishmael, who was not the son of the promise. It was son of the flesh. And that caused trouble. And then God comes through on his promise. And Isaac is born. And then Isaac has his own personality, a very different kind of a personality than his father, Abraham. But he's more of a settler in the land, while Abraham is more the pioneer. He's moving through and he's building altars wherever he goes. And yes, he makes his mistakes, but he always comes back worshiping the Lord. And he's building altars. Isaac, on the other hand, is digging wells in the places that he goes. He's settling down. And ends up, they have, he and his wife, Rebecca, have 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. And Esau is he's the firstborn, and the one who comes out is actually holding his heel, and they call him Yaakov. And I'm going through this for a couple of reasons. One, to kind of get that intro back into where we were last time, but also the name thing is interesting because Esau, he was a very hairy baby. I mean, if you've seen newborns, sometimes you say, oh, he's got a lot of hair, or she's got a lot of hair, and he doesn't have any hair, but Esau was a hairy baby. I mean, he was just hairy. I don't know if he looked like a chimp. I don't know what he looked like, but he was a hairy baby. So they called him hairy. Esau means hairy. And Jacob, I won't go through it all, but Yaakov means to hold. And there's a pun that's going on in there, which I won't bore you with right now. I think it's interesting, so Yaakov basically means to supplant or try to get over. Well, he's holding onto the heel of his brother. So Esau's firstborn, but here's Jacob holding onto his heel. So it looks like there's a battle. And God has already told Rebecca that, she was feeling this disturbance in her womb. It wasn't just the kids moving around. God says, you have 2 nations in your belly. How'd you like to know that one? It's one thing to know you're pregnant. It's another thing to know you have twins coming. When you're told you have 2 nations in you, and it's like, that's way beyond twins. And they're battling, and they're going to be at war with one another. And of course, that becomes the story. And we see how Jacob, Esau's a man of, he's one of these guys that, in a sense, when you start to read about him, men start to say, yeah, I can identify with this guy. He's a man's man. He's a man of the field. He's a hunter. He's he's an army ranger. He's a tough guy. He can do it all. And Jacob often, I really do believe, he gets mischaracterized as a mama's boy because, he likes to cook. And there's nothing wrong with cooking. I like to cook too. But he likes to cook. He hangs with mom a lot. But he's not a mama's boy. But he's clever. And so he outsmarts his brother Esau. Esau comes back from hunting and he hasn't gotten anything. And he's famished and, Jacob's, cooking his good red lentil stew, and he trades food in exchange for the birthright because he's the firstborn, and he says, "Oh, if you sell me your birthright, I'll feed you," and then he goes for it. And he shows his character by saying, "What's that birthright to me anyhow?" That's the indicator of what his character is really like. And of course, we see many years later now when Isaac thinks he's dying, which he's not, but he thinks he's dying, and there's obviously a problem between he and Rebekah because Rebekah is trying to outsmart Isaac, and Isaac is, anyhow, the whole thing's a mess. And Rebekah puts Jacob in a position to outsmart his father and to get the blessing, as if he was the firstborn, to get the blessing from his father. And when all that goes down and it's finally discovered, Esau's ready to kill him. So mom says, "You've got to get out of here, and head up north and go to my brother Laban's place, and you'll be fine there. But let things settle down a little bit, and then Esau will get over this." And that's the last time he'll ever see his mom. He's going to be gone. Well, he'll be 20 years, and that's what we're going to see tonight. It's almost the end of 20 years at this point. 20 years with Laban, he'll be actually 30 years before he ever sees his father again, and he'll never see his mother again. So 3 different kinds of personalities. Now, Jacob has been up in the north, in Haran, where basically where the civil war is going on in Syria right now, in that area, northern Syria. And he's, of course, Laban he's met his match with Laban. Jacob is the kind of guy who can get over. We see him as a scoundrel. We see him as the kind of guy who's always cutting the best deal and all that. Laban can be a real, you-know-what. And so he's always getting over on Jacob. And so including, and we looked at this last time, where he falls madly in love with Rachel almost from the first time he sees her. And so when Laban says, I'd like you to work for me, and he said, I'd like to marry your daughter. He said, work for me for 7 years and you can have her. And he works for 7 years. The wedding comes. The wedding night comes. He wakes up in the morning. I explained it all last time, so I'm not going to go through that again. That was just a little too delicate threading that needle last time, so I'm not going to do that one again. And he wakes up in the morning and finds out that it's not Rachel. It's her older sister, Leah. And Laban just explains, it's not our custom to marry off the younger daughter first, so just, work another 7 years and I'll give you Rachel. But, you could take her after this week. You can have her, and then, you can just pay me back, basically, by working another 7 years. So now he's worked 14 years at this point, and at this point, we went through this last time, we see all 12 sons have been born at this point. 6 of them have been born by Leah, 2 from each of their handmaidens, and 1 so far, Joseph, has been born by Rachel. Rachel had problems conceiving and bearing children. So, and that's where we left off last time. Just as a reminder, we went through a lot last time, kind of just explaining, what all these names mean. It's important to keep that, if you can, marked in your Bible, because as you go through your study in the Bible, there will be upwards of 25 times that you're going to see a list of the 12 tribes. Each time there'll be, I think every single time, Maybe there's once or twice they're exactly the same. But I'm going to just say every single time in those 25 times that they're listed in a different order. And those names mean something. And so very often, some are more obvious than others. We'll get to that in chapter 49. But those names, in the order that they're in, God is communicating something with those names. So it's really pretty interesting. Sometimes they're very subtle, sometimes a little bit more obvious. So we left off last time where Rachel feels vindicated. She's conceived. She's born a son. God has taken away my reproach, says in verse 23 of chapter 30. So she called his name Ya'asaph, or Yosef, and she said, the Lord shall add to me another son. He shall add is what Joseph means. And it's important to understand as we go into this now, here's what Jacob has after 14 years of working for his uncle Laban. He has 2 wives, 2 handmaidens. He has 12 sons, and he has, well, 1 daughter who's listed, probably other daughters, but 1 daughter who's listed, Dinah or Dinah, who we'll read about later on. And that's what he has. He has no flocks. He takes care of his uncle's flocks. He has nothing. So he has no net worth. He's got family, but he actually couldn't take that family if he wanted to unless Laban allowed him to do that. So he's snookered. He's in the corner, and he can't go anywhere in this situation. And part of the reason I'm doing all this is to remind us of the character of this man Laban and what God has been doing with him. Because, just like when we come to the New Testament and we look at Peter, everybody can relate to Peter. We say he's a ready, shoot, aim kind of guy. He's the kind of guy who's got a mouth shaped like his foot. And we all relate to him because we're like that. There's a Peter in every single one of us, man or woman. And Jacob is the kind of guy that, again, man or woman, we can relate to him in some ways, depending upon, how much in the flesh we are at any given point. But as Christians, we can relate to him because we know God. He basically knows God at this point. But he's a guy who gets by on his own schemes. He's a guy who's sharp. He's clever. He can really make something happen. So he depends on his ability. I don't know if you know anybody like that. If you ever just look in the mirror. Because, you probably look at yourself and you think, I wouldn't admit it in front of other people, but I'm a pretty smart person. I'm pretty capable. I can do this, I can do that, and I don't like to brag, but it's just fact. We kind of think that way about ourselves sometimes. You're thinking, really, you think that way? No, I said, you think that way about yourself. And so here's a guy who does think that way about himself because he is very clever. He's very good. And what he doesn't realize most of the time is that God's really the one who's giving him the victory. And that's the issue here. And that's what gets worked out through this whole process. So he has come up to Padan Aram in the area of Haran. And he's come with nothing. And he still has nothing. Obviously his family, but he has nothing at this point. And basically, Laban's been eating his lunch the whole way. And so we pick up here in verse 25 that it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you." And Laban said to him, "Please, stay." Laban knows, where his bread is buttered. He knows that he gets rich from this guy Jacob. They're his flock. These are his sheep and his goats, and he is loaded because of the work that this guy does. Not because of the work that his sons do. He's got sons. But it's Jacob who's doing the work that really is making Laban rich. So please, he says, verse 27, stay. If I have found favor in your eyes, I love the way people talk sometimes, like, you're a scoundrel. If I found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Interesting statement. And then he said, how would you like to hear this? You go and talk to your boss, you say, I think I'm going to take another job. And the boss says, no, please stay. I can tell that God has made me rich because of you. And then he says, just name me your wages. Can you ever imagine your boss saying, just tell me what you need to earn? I'll take care of it, right? That's what he says. Name me your wages and I will give it. So Jacob said to him, you know how I've served you, and your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. And the Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I also provide for my own house? In other words, everything I'm doing has been blessing you, but look at all these kids I got. Now I got 4 women, and I've got all these kids, all these mouths to feed. How am I going to do this? I need to make something. And so he said, well, what shall I give you? Laban says. And Jacob says, you shall not give me anything. Imagine that answer. Don't give me anything. That sounds like there's a hook coming somewhere here. Don't give me anything. I mean, these guys this is like the battle of the Titans. When it comes to negotiations and things like that, these guys are made for each other. And he says, don't give me anything. He's having a God moment in his own way. You shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me, and note that, actually circle the pronoun in verse 32. Let me, Jacob speaking, let me pass through all of your flock today, removing from there all of the speckled and spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. Now, most of us are not farm people, so it's like a lot of this is like, huh? What's going on? Well, because the solid color, a solid color sheep or goat, that's the dominant gene, and so it's considered the weaker animal are considered, spotted, speckled, mottled kind of an appearance. And so he's saying, I'll take the weak ones. Let me go through the flock. I'll pick the weak ones. You get all the solid colors. How's that for a deal? And he says, these shall be my wages, verse 33. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come when the subject of my wages comes before you. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it's with me. In other words, if it turns out at the end of the deal, when the day comes, if you ever find or your sons ever find one of the solid colored animals in my flock, you can consider it stolen. You can kill me for stealing. I mean, that's really, think of what the deal that he's making here. And Laban said, oh, that it were according to your word. Like, there's no negotiation. It's like, yeah, let's shake on that. That's too good to be true. Because he's saying, you're going to give me the strongest? Because if they're the strongest, that doesn't mean they're flexing their muscles, they're pressing their body weight. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying that they're going to produce more. They're going to, when a solid colored ram goes to mate, with a ewe, and if she's spotted or speckled or something, chances are the offspring is going to be solid. So that means that Laban's, his flocks are going to increase and increase because Jacob just said, I'll take the weaker ones. So from a genetic standpoint, you're thinking, genetics, we're the ones who know about genetics. Look, if you raise animals, you know something about, you may not understand what DNA is, thousands of years ago, but you understood dominance in terms of, characteristics of the animal. So Laban is all in at this point. So verse 35, so he removed that day. Who's he? Laban. Watch what happens. Jacob said, verse 32, let me go through the flock and I'll take out all the spotted, speckled, mottled, blah, blah, blah. I'll take them out and I'll take them for myself. You take the rest and I'll watch over both flocks, but they'll be separate from one another. Laban, just a few verses later, he goes through the flock and he takes out the speckled and spotted and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted and every one that had some white in it and all the brown ones among the lambs. And he gave them into the hands of his sons. He took all, look what happened here. Laban took all, he made the deal with Jacob. And in 2 breaths, he goes and takes all of what should have been Jacob's to start with, takes them away from him, gives them to his sons. And I can tell you're not incensed by this, but I am, okay? And he put them into the hands of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob had the rest of Laban's flocks. 3 days' journey, like you really got to put that much of a journey? Why would you have to do that? Because he's a scoundrel. And scoundrels expect other people to act like scoundrels. And so he puts 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. Jacob still goes ahead and he does his job. He keeps his end of the bargain. Now, this next part, and you've probably read this before, and I think most of us, when we read it, we go, yeah, right, well, whatever. I mean, I took a little biology when I was in high school, and I don't get this. I don't know how this works. It can't be. It's got to be an old shepherd's tale of some sort, And so now Jacob took for himself, and it's not. From the research I've done, it's not, which is kind of strange. But anyhow, now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, and he peeled white strips in them, and he exposed the white which was in the rods. So in other words, he took these long rods of wood from these various trees, took a knife, and he took stripes of bark off. This is very white wood underneath, and he takes stripes of the bark off, so it's like a candy cane without the twirl, okay? That's what he did with these things. Sounds kind of weird, right? And he exposed the white, which was in the rods, verse 38, and the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs. In other words, they got these watering troughs, so, it's got water in them. The animals come to get water, and he's got these rods in there with these stripes on them. And where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. I mean, I got more needles to thread here, but anyhow, so this is, one of those times where, the ram would take advantage and say, this is a good time to mate. This is better than any other time, at least, we're drinking. And so, so the point is, the animals are drinking at the trough. There are these striped rods in the water troughs, and the rams are mating with the ewes, and so the flocks conceive, verse 39, before the rods, and the flocks brought forth. These are all solid-colored animals, because Laban's already taken the speckled and spotted and mottled, animals away. Put a 3-day journey between himself and Laban, put him into the hands of his kids. And so these are all Laban's animals. But what they produced when they gave birth were streaked, speckled, and spotted animals. That doesn't make sense. That's not good genetics, right? That's not what we expect, because the solid colors is the dominant gene. And yet they're producing a weaker, in terms of what you'd expect in terms of the coloring of the hair. God's doing it. Now, some people will say this was just an idea that Jacob had, and that God, of course, is really the one who's doing it. And yeah, God is doing it. there's a lot of really interesting, and I'm not going to go into it, I'm just going to say it and you can look it up for yourself. Kyle and Delitzsch were, and you probably don't spend much time reading Kyle and Delitzsch, but they're like Old Testament scholars from the early 1800s, I'm pretty sure. And so it's not the kind of commentary that most people spend time reading. Nerdy people like me who like Hebrew and stuff do that. And so, but Kyle and Delitzsch, made the point that this was a standard practice and that it really did work. I looked it up, and actually there's a number of people, with letters after their names who also confirm that. So, this is not my area of expertise, but it is interesting how many people will verify this. I'll just leave it there. We know ultimately God's the one who brings the increase. And Jacob does give credit to God in all of this, but he's a crafty guy, and he knows a lot about handling animals. So he did this thing, and this was the result. And he continues to do this. Then Jacob separated the lambs, verse 40, and he made the flocks face toward the streaked and all the brown in the flock of Laban, but he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. Why? Because his flock are spotted, streaked, mottled, etc. That's weaker. Laban's are solid. That's stronger. That's dominant gene. So he didn't want Laban's flock mating with his own. He wanted his own to reproduce, and to continue to build that, that hair coloring in them. So it came. I mean, that's the only way they can tell the flocks apart, because that was the deal that they made. Solid is Laban's, and spotted, speckled, mottled, that's Jacob's. So he put his own flocks by themselves, didn't put them with Laban's flock. Verse 44. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, so that they might conceive among the rods. And then when the flocks were feeble, he didn't put them in. And so the feebler ones were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. So just in terms of overall strength of the animal, he let the weaker ones become Laban's, and he took the stronger ones for himself. So not only does he have the right coloring, but now he's developing a stronger breed, in the sense, of his own. This guy knows his stuff, and he's a crafty dude. He's taking basically 6 years. He's doing this. And I want you to keep a number in mind. In those days, if you had somewhere between 10, 25 goats, 10 or 25 sheep, you were considered middle class. You were making a pretty decent living if you had that size of a herd. And when you realize what he ends up with at the end, this man is loaded. Okay, and at one time it was Laban who was loaded. Now it's going to be Jacob who is loaded, and Laban who ends up with nothing. Okay, so verse 43. The man, Jacob, became exceedingly prosperous. He had large flocks, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. So he's got a lot. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all this wealth. In other words, he stole our inheritance. But they can't prove it. I mean, it's just that they're jealous. They want their inheritance, and this guy has come in, married their sisters, and has all these children. Now he's taken the flocks, and the flocks continue. The size of Laban's flock continues to shrink. The size of Jacob's continues to grow. So they're very envious, and that's not a good situation when you're out in the middle of nowhere. And then, verse 2, Jacob saw the countenance of Laban. Literally, he saw his face. And indeed, it was not favorable toward him as before. So, you know what that's like when you're in a situation with somebody and you can just tell there's some ag in this situation. There's just something awry. And there's a disturbance in the force. And this is not going well. And so he figures this out, and he realizes, it's probably time to hit the road. But the Lord said, and this is really kind of like the first time where we actually read that the Lord told him something. It's been, at this point now, it's been 20 years. It was the 14 years that he worked for both of those wives, right? Leah and Rachel. Now it's been 6 years that he's done all this that we just read through about the animals. So now the Lord speaks to him and says, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. Just running back, when he left, okay, when he left the area of Beersheba, Hebron, depending upon where they were actually at that time, when he left home and came up to Padan Aram, he not only did he not have anything, but he really didn't know the Lord. It was only at Bethel when he has this dream and he sees a door opened in the skies in this dream, and he sees angels ascending and descending on this ladder, and we've made it like a children's song type of thing. But he has this vision, and that's why he calls the place, it used to be called Luz, and he calls it Beit El, house of God. And he said, this is the portal. Basically, he thinks that's the portal. This is the way that you get from earth to heaven, because angels are going up and down on this ladder. And he sees the angel of the Lord. He sees Jesus Christ, pre-incarnate, standing up on top of the stairway up there at the portal into heaven. And that's when he really kind of comes to, we'll say, know God. We use so much Christian terminology, and we say, he was saved then. It's like, no, let's not use the terminology like that. He comes to know God. There's more of a personal belief now. It's not his parents, it's his own. But he's been still operating in his own strength up till now. And now the Lord speaks to him and says, return, verse 3, to the land of your fathers, to your family, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent, and he called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and he said to them, I see your father's countenance, and it's not favorable toward me as it was before. But the God of my father has been with me, and you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your father has deceived me. He's changed my wages 10 times. Think about that. Over 20 years, Laban continues to change his wages. He said, but God did not allow him to hurt me. In other words, each time he changed his wages, God did something else to, increase Jacob's own wealth. So he said, if he said, thus the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said, thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then they all bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. Just put that in perspective. You're thinking this is just some old story about sheep and goats. But all of the wealth of this man Laban has been transferred through animals over to Jacob. God has done this. Laban is not unaware of this and obviously disturbed. And Jacob knows this is definitely time, to leave, and God has spoken to him. He gets it, right? So he says, and it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and I saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. And the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. I said, here I am. I always like that. Here I am. Like, where do you think God thought you were? Anyhow, and he said, lift your eyes now and see all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel. I'm the God that was standing up on top of that stairway. I hate to say it, stairway to heaven. I'm the God who was standing up there. I'm the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. Then Rachel and Leah answered. These women, they're not real happy about Dad. They answered and they said, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he sold us, and he's completely consumed our money. And that's the thing. We could talk a lot about, and it's a legitimate topic. We're going to get into it tonight, but about how women were treated in those days. But in this family, where Laban probably would have still treated them, not the way that one would expect a woman ought to be treated, or biblically how a woman should be treated. But even worse, he's treated them as chattel. And the dowry that would have been paid has been completely consumed. They have nothing. They're saying, our father sold us. There's no value that we have because he's taken it for himself. And for all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours. In other words, everything you gained, that's really ours. Because it should have been his. That's ours. So we're in this together. They get it. And you know, they're really ours and our children's. Now, then, whatever God has said to you, then do it. So Jacob rose, and he set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen, we're going to get back to this, but she had stolen her father's household idols, or your Bible may say gods, depending upon your translation, teraphim. They were little figurines. And Laban had these in his house. And Rachel steals them. Now, you know you got trouble when your God can be stolen. Okay, so you got the wrong God in the first place. But I want to come back in a little bit because and to help explain something, hopefully, because it puts everything into a little deeper understanding of why Laban gets very upset about this. So, okay, so, you know, again, verse 19, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away, unknown to Laban, the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee, which makes sense. I intend to flee. So he fled with all that he had. That means with his wives, the handmaids, the 13 children, all these flocks and donkeys and servants and camels, all of it. He steals away. He arose, he crossed the river, and he headed toward the mountains of Gilead. Okay, he's up in Syria over sort of toward the east, so moving toward what we would call Iraq today, okay? And so now he's come down and he's moving sort of south and to the west. He's going to cross the river, the Jabbok, and he's going to end up in the mountains of Gilead, which is a lot of mountains, but you can see them when you're in the Galilee. You can look over and say, those are the mountains of Gilead. You read about the mountains of Gilead a lot in the Bible, right? So he's heading home. It's going to take a while, but he's headed home. So now Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. So Jacob's already got a start, right? I mean, he can't move too fast because of all he has, but he's already got a 3-day advance on things. So Laban took his brethren with him. So that means the other guys in his family. That means he's got warriors. If they're going to have a fight, he's going to have some muscle with them, right? And he pursued Jacob for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and he said to him, "Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad." And so Laban overtook Jacob, and now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? That you've stolen away unknown to me, and you've carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword. Why did you flee away secretly? Why did you steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs and with timbrel and a harp, or I may have sent you away in 100 pieces, but I don't think he would have done that. But I might have done that, but the chances of it would be very low. He said, and you didn't allow me. Now he goes into the father and grandfather mode, and he's weeping. He's getting the Academy Award for this. And he says, and you didn't allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you've done foolishly in so doing. It's in my power to do to you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night. The God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Okay, so it gets kind of weird, right? We say, okay, he's making a big deal out of little figurines. You can always get more figurines, right? Just go to the local teraphim store and you can buy some more. And, if it's that big a deal, I mean, you've lost all your flocks, your family's gone, all this, but you're incensed over these figurines. What's going on here? One of the things that, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the term, the tablets at Nuzi. But anyhow, so if you kind of think of what I described as the area of Padan Aram, okay? It's near the Tigris and the Euphrates River, okay? So if you're looking at the Middle East, if you're looking at Israel and just go straight up north into Syria, where the civil war has been taking place, and kind of move to the east a little bit, you're over toward Iraq. And so that's where Laban's home is. That's where Jacob's been. That's where all this has been taking place for the last 20 years. A significant distance to the east from there is all part of what's called Chaldea in those days, okay? And back in I think the 20s, 1923, 27, something like that, there was a very large archaeological dig that happened in the ancient city of Nuzi. And in that dig, if I say archaeology, some of you are getting sleepy. But this is actually, I think, it's pretty cool because it helps to explain what's going on here. The idea with these tablets at Nuzi revealed a lot of things. It helps archaeologists and scholars who read the Bible and ancient Near Eastern history. It helps them to understand other things. So, and what they learned from the tablets at Nuzi is that these teraphim, and they're not big. Okay, we're not talking about big idols that are carved out of wood or marble or something, and people would bow down. It's a different thing. And you see them. If you go into the museum in Jerusalem, you see these little figurines. And the idea was that they were markers. They were actually markers of trade. They indicated that you had the right to possess certain areas of land, that the wealth that you had in your family. These were indicators that is like a boundary marker almost. These were indicators of your right to possess those areas. So, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Rachel has taken the evidence that her father has right to certain properties and things like that. She steals it all. She steals it. She's not real happy with Dad. And how could she be? She was madly in love with this guy, Jacob. And their wedding day, that night, she's forced out of the deal, and her sister's put into the marriage bed. So she has to take second place, and then, of course, she's not happy. She probably blames it on her dad, but she's not happy about the fact that, she's only born one child at this point out of 13 altogether that have been born. And she's just upset with her dad, and she takes these markers, which indicate her dad's right. Hey, he's a heavy. In the area of Padan Aram, he's a heavy. He controls a lot of property. He controls, I told you before, you'd be middle class if you had 25 goats or sheep. He's probably got thousands. This guy's like a prince of his area, and Jacob just got it all. And on top of that, Jacob doesn't know it, but his wife Rachel just stole all of the evidence. It would be like stealing all the land deeds, and no one can prove that they own the land now because you have the deed, okay? That's what's on. And he's upset. He said, you take my daughters, you've taken my grandkids, I want to kiss them, you didn't let me do that, I would have had a party, I would have sent you away with joy, and blah, 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 blah. And besides all that, you stole my gods. He's really saying, you've gotten one over on me. You stole the evidence that I own this stuff, that I've got a legal right to all this. And I can't prove that legal right without those figurines. Jacob doesn't know anything about this. So that's the background here. It's just, so don't just think silly little idols. There's far more to it. Archaeology can be your friend. And not that you didn't think that, but I just want you to know that. So verse 31, then Jacob answered and he said to Laban, in answering, why'd you do this? Because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, this is a bold speech, spoken in ignorance and self-righteousness, because he knows he didn't steal. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. He didn't find these gods, these idols. And then he went out of Leah's tent and he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle, and she sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but he didn't find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. There's only so far Dad's going to go, when something like that is said. So he backs off. He searched, but he did not find. Imagine if he knew where those idols really were after she said that. I mean, talk about adding insult to injury. So he searched, didn't find them. Then Jacob was angry. Now he's really angry because you've accused me of it and you haven't found it. And he rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and he said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you've so hotly pursued me? Although you've searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young. I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That would have been his right to take a little bit that would have been his right. But he never did it. He said, that which was torn by beasts, I did not bring it to you. I bore the loss of it. He was responsible. That was a shepherd's responsibility. And he could have done a switcheroo, but he never did that. He said, you required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. And there I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. And thus I have been in your house 20 years. I've served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. And Laban answered and he said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these daughters, to these my daughters, or to their children whom they've borne? Part of the reason is he doesn't have any proof. He doesn't have those little idols, those little figurines. What can I do? He said, now therefore come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and he set up as a pillar. And then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and they made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. You set up a heap, you're going to have a covenant, make a covenant. So you eat there as to do it. That's why they didn't just have a picnic. And Laban called it Yegersaro Hata. I don't know. It's a Chaldean phrase that means a heap of witness. Like these stones are a witness. And Jacob called it Gilead, which is a Hebrew term, means basically the same thing. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Gilead. Also Mizpah. Because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. I don't know if guys really do this, but I see girls do this a lot. Women, but I mean, especially teenage girls do it a lot, and young adults, and where you can go to a store and you can get a Mizpah coin, and it's cut, usually kind of a jagged cut, and so you make 2 necklaces out of it, right? And so each one, or 2 bracelets, or whatever the case may be, and they each wear it. And it's called a Mizpah coin. May the Lord watch over, you and me while we're away from each other. It's a really cool idea. Unless you read the context. Because the context is, may the Lord watch between you and me when we're absent one from another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, behold, God is witness between you and me. And then Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, and that I will not pass between this heap to you, and you will not pass between this heap and this pillar to me for harm. Remember, he doesn't have those figurines. He can't prove his ownership. So they've agreed that we're going to use this heap of stones as a witness, and that we believe that God sees this and is going to hold us accountable. So those Mizpah coins, think about that next time you do that. He says, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain, called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban arose. He kissed his sons and daughters. He blessed them. And then Laban departed and returned to his place. Whew. I mean, it's all interesting, but let's zero in here. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. I don't know what that looks like. It's not described. He went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which means 2 camps. And you'll find out later on why it's 2 camps, because he's going to divide his family into 2. Everybody's going to be on one side, he's going to be on the other. So it's 2 camps. And then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, which is also known as Edom. It's the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban, I've stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord, think of what Jacob's saying. I have sent to tell my lord, his brother Esau, who he snookered. I've sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. What's he doing? Schmoozing. It's a schmooze. That's all it is. It's a schmooze. Because he's deathly afraid that he's going to die. Esau has become a prince in this area too. 20 years have gone by, and he's got a reputation already. So he tells his servants to go on ahead, find Esau, and tell him this. So verse 6, so the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he's also coming to meet you. Oh, ruh-roh. I mean, I don't know how old you think his kids are, but the oldest ones can't be more than 13. Okay, so he's coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. They're not just going to have a reunion. That's not the point of this. So Jacob, you can basically say yikes at that point. So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. I get it. And he divided the people that were with him, and the flocks and the herds and the camels, into 2 companies. And he said, if Esau comes to the one company and he attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape. So, he knows that God has made a promise. He knows that God has said that, all the blessings are going to come through his line. So he figures he's going to divide them out. Look what's happening. Look, I know that all I'm doing here, and most of this, is reading. And we can go, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Hey, get it what's happening. Because you're Jacob, and so are you, and so am I. We all do this. We got to connive away. We got to figure a way that I can survive this. Got to come up with a line. Got to come up with a plan. He's got a plan. They're going to come after us. We don't have the strength to fight against Esau and 400 men who are ready for a war. I don't have that kind of power behind me. So we'll divide into 2. If he takes one, at least one of the parties is going to escape. And so then Jacob said, oh God, he prays. This is unique for him. It hasn't happened, really, since Bethel 20 years earlier. He prays, and he said, O God of my father Abraham and the God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant, for I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well. In other words, he's holding him up to his promises. And that's okay, by the way. I mean, God knows his promises that he's made to us. But it's also a good way to pray, to remember the promises that God has made to us and pray according to those promises, because God does keep his word. And he says, for you said, I will surely treat you well, and I will make your descendants of the sand as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for the multitude. So he lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau, his brother. 200 female goats and 20 male goats and 200 ewes and 20 rams and 30 milk camels. I don't know what that milk tastes like, but I'm not sure I'd like to try it. And with their colts, and if you've ever really looked at a camel up close, you know why I'd say that. 40 cows and 10 bulls and 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. And then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, and every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, pass over before me and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong and where are you going? Who are these in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It's a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he's also behind us. And so he commanded the second and the third, and all who followed in droves. I mean, imagine that kind of a parade that's coming. That would be very impressive to Esau. And so he commanded them all, and also saying, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present. That's the point. It's a schmooze, because he's afraid. I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present went on before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. I only have a little time, but I do want to read this, because this is where it comes down to, who am I? Who are you? Who is the Lord to you? How strong are you in yourself? We're actually a lot stronger in ourselves than we actually think sometimes. Even when we think, I'm weaker now and I've really given myself over to the Lord, there's so much of me that I hold on to. And here's this man who still is holding on to so much for himself. It's because of the fear that he has about Esau that he's even praying. Have you ever been in that situation where you haven't prayed in a long time? But because of the threat of what's about to happen, that's going to eat your lunch, that you actually humble yourself before the Lord and you begin to pray. Well, that's what's happening here. So he separates himself. He arose that night, and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them, and he sent them over the brook, and he sent over what he had. And then Jacob was left alone. And you got to understand, he doesn't have a Coleman lantern. He doesn't have a stove. And he doesn't have a flashlight. He doesn't have a campfire going. He doesn't want one of Esau's guys to spy him out and then slit his throat in the middle of the night. He doesn't want. So he's just going to hide in the rocks. Blackness. That's all he's got. He's afraid. He is absolutely afraid that all he has is going to be taken from him, most importantly, his own life. And it could happen tonight. And now, I'm just going to say it a little different than what's written here. All of a sudden, in the middle of the night, boom! A man pounces on him in the middle of the night. That's what happens here. Now, it says, and because we read it in the Bible, we read it calmly. Okay, but that's not what's happening. It doesn't feel calm. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Like, okay. No. I mean, yes, that's what happened, but he's absolutely petrified about the loss of his life and what's about to happen. He feels like, okay, I got my family safe. I'm over here, separate from them, and I can't do anything to draw attention to myself. Maybe he's trying to get a little bit of sleep. He's dozing off. It could be 1 in the morning. And all of a sudden, bam! Some guy's on top of him. So what do? You fight back. There's only one thing to do. He fights back. And he wrestles. Any of you guys ever wrestled? I mean, were wrestlers like high school, college, anything like that? You can raise your hand. Hi, raise your hand. Be proud to be a wrestler. Okay. How long is a match? 3 what? Minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. All night. All night. All night. I mean, can you imagine his lungs are burning from this, just trying to, I mean, and now read what happens here. Now, we're going to find out later on, this is God he's wrestling with. It says a man wrestled with him. When it's all said and done, it becomes very obvious. This is, the technical term is a theophany or a Christophany. This is a pre-incarnate presentation of Jesus Christ. This is Jesus meek and mild. Wrestling with Jacob. Wrestling. Not like dads wrestle with their 5-year-olds. No. Wrestling with him all night long, man to man, until the breaking of day. And now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, meaning when the man saw that he didn't prevail, I mean, Jacob just kept wrestling. He touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. I mean, have you ever had a bone come out of socket? That's just, I mean, I haven't, but I've read enough about it that it's just a terrible pain, and yet he continues. What does he have, a hammerlock around this guy? And so he said, let me go. This is Jesus speaking. Now, Jesus could have wiped him out in no time. I mean, he's just meeting him where he's at in terms of his own strength. Let me go, for the day breaks. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. You talk about chutzpah. Think about this now. But look what he's doing. This is a man who is that strong in himself, and yet now he knows that this is not just a man. There's something special about this man, that he would ask for the blessing. He knows this is God. And he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So the man said to him, what is your name? He said, Yaakov, which is pretty obvious, pretty funny. It means heel grabber, and he's got him in a hammerlock, right? And he said, your name shall no longer be Yaakov, it will be Yisrael. Now, very quickly, for you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed. You could translate this, and I think most people I know who would get into this discussion would disagree with me, but everything I've seen is that you can actually translate this word, Yisrael, 3 ways. One is, he contends with God, or he is governed by God. Now, those are 2 different ideas. Or he is a prince of God. And you don't care about all the technical reasons why, but you can do that. But he says right here why he calls him. Because you have struggled with God, you've prevailed, and so he has prevailed with God. He struggled with God. He prevailed with him. And then Jacob, I love it, says, tell me your name. Tell me your name, I pray. And he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, which means face of God. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. I want you, as we close, I want you to get this. I've tried to rush through a lot of this, and I keep coming back to the character of Jacob. Now, he's always, he was a scoundrel. He's softened up over the years, but he's always got an angle. He's a great negotiator. He's obviously very strong. He can push. We all can relate to that one way or another. We're all different, but we've all got that in us. If we've got to do something, we're going to do whatever we've got to do. And it's when he's most afraid, really at his weakest point, that he's pounced on by God. That at any point, God could have said, listen, this is who I am. I'm with you. I have a plan for you. And basically, that's what he's doing. I have a plan for you. Let me go so that I can bless you. He says, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. And it's like, we're arguing over a little technical point. Just, we understand who the man is, so let him bless you. No, I have a plan for my life. God says, I have a better plan for your life. As good as your plan is, I have a better plan. You know how good your plan is for your life? We think we have such a great idea about what our life can be. Yet God has such a much better life plan for our lives. The problems we get ourselves into, the marriages we destroy, the children we destroy, the businesses we destroy, the churches we destroy, the things we do because of some plan we've got for our lives, because we've got to be right or we've got to get over. God's got a much better plan. And we end up in a wrestling match. Here's a guy whose hip goes out of joint, and for the rest of his life, by the way, he's what? He was 73 when he left to go to Padan Aram. It's 20 years later. It's a 93-year-old man who's doing this. Now, he's middle-aged. He's going to die at 175, but still, think of this. And for the rest of his life, he will walk with this major limp and this pain as a constant reminder that he did wrestle with God. We use this, a lot of times people will say, you need to wrestle with God. You want that blessing in your life? Wrestle with God in prayer. No, that's not what this means. That's not what this means. You don't have to wrestle with God in prayer. You need to give up and let God show you the plan that he has for your life. Stop the wrestling. That's the point. Stop the wrestling. That's what that God's telling him here. Stop the wrestling. Let me go, and I'll bless you. So finally, it happens, but we don't have to walk with a limp for the rest of our lives. We don't have to walk with all that damage in our life, all that scar tissue in our soul that we do to ourselves because we insisted on having our way, because we had a plan for our lives. And in some cases, some people never see what they could have had. They never see what they could have had because they insisted on having their own way. They insisted on it. People in this room, it's part of the human character. So he said, Jacob called the name, verse 30, the name of the place, Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. My life is preserved. What does David say? I'm ending. But what does David say in Psalm 23? Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We love that. If you translate it accurately in Hebrew, I mean technically, word for word, surely goodness and mercy will pursue me or hunt after me. God's goodness and mercy is hunting after you. In all those things we get ourselves into, and all those problems we get ourselves into because we want our way, here's God pursuing you. He's hunting after you because he has a better plan. He has a better plan. Surely goodness and mercy will hunt me down all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Wouldn't you rather dwell in the house of the Lord forever, having been governed by God in your life, rather than wrestling with him at every turn? So he called the name of the place Peniel, because I saw the face of God. And just as he crossed over, it says Penuel, but it's the same word. It's just a Hebrew scribal error. And the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. And therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank. This is not part of the law. It's just a tradition. They don't eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because that's where God touched the socket of Jacob's hip and the muscle that shrank. I know we've gotten long. I wanted to wrap that up. God is pursuing you, no matter where you are right now. No matter where you are with the Lord, you could be deep in sin. You could be 20 years running away from him. Or you could be walking with him. He's still pursuing you. He wants you to experience that joy of your salvation. He wants you to experience the sweetness of that fellowship with him, and to know that his way for your life is not about satisfying every fleshly, carnal desire you have, but something much richer that you'll never understand until you stop wrestling, until you let him. Let's stand together. So, Lord, we thank you, Lord, for your word, and I know we covered a lot of ground, but thank you for the truth, because it does set us free, Lord, knowing that you pursue us, that you hunt after us. Your goodness and your mercy and your loving kindness pursue us, Lord. How good you are. We love you. So often we say, you're a good God, Lord. The truth is, there is no God except you. And your goodness and your mercy and your grace and your peace, the shalom that we receive from being with you and being your children, is beyond measure. It's eternal and it's infinite in its measure. And you love us and desire, Lord, to pour that upon us and through us, Lord. Not to give us everything we want, but to form us and conform us into your image, Lord. To transform us into the image of Jesus Christ. Lord, continue that work that you've begun in us. For those people, and there are some in here, no doubt, who continue to resist your transforming work, Lord, may tonight be the night they say, okay, I stop wrestling. Lord, I want to be governed by God. Lord, whether that means accepting you as Savior tonight, Lord, then let that happen tonight. For those who've been running for years and years, though they claim to know you at one time, then tonight, Lord, may they come back to Peniel to see you face to face and to let you, even if it means doing something to them that they walk with a limp for the rest of their lives, but they can say, I have seen God face to face, and he loves me. Thank you for your great love for us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.